Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the late 70s, very early 80s band, The Cigarettes, because I recently spoke to Stephen Taylor, bass player from the band, to find out more about life, love, poetry, and all that other groovy stuff. Anyway, this is the interview. And so, yes, just to give you a bit of a heads up, Optic Nerve Records in Preston has just brought out on white vinyl a collection of the Cigarettes' work, which is titled You Were So Young, which does feature, I suspect, all their work and much, much more. And I do believe fantastic artwork, as we talk about in the interview. So for all those fans out there, do check out Optic Nerve Recordings and the Cigarettes' latest releases. Anyway, after several minutes of casual chat with Stephen, we got down to that very interesting subject that was the early formative years. And this was Stephen's response. Stephen, take it away.
I think David Bowie was big. T-Rex. I think T-Rex was just before David Bowie. It was.
Yeah.
And that was the first big one. It was the same period. It was like that glam rock period, you know.
Yes. Well, it was interesting because Bowie had done lots of stuff in the 60s, which obviously I went back and listened to, which was pretty dreadful in a good way. And then, he did Space Oddity, that first album, which wasn't that great. And then he slowly got, Mick Ronson and Tony Visconti and Tony DeFries and all that main man stuff. But, in that early 70s, it was really the competition was between T-Rex and Slade, and it wasn't until...
Yeah, I think they had hits before. I mean, Bowie had the Space Oddity in '69, but then his first hit was Starman.
I think that was the one.
Starman Dancing. One of them, I remember, I think it was Starman, where I remember seeing him on Top of the Pop. I'd heard the record, and I imagined that he just was like in denims with long hair with the centre parting, And then I saw him on Top of the Pops, and he just wasn't anything like that. He was just, and that was like the big one, wasn't it? When he was on Top of the Pops doing Starman, and then he went to school the next day and just go, "My God, did you see that?" And that was it. And he was just fantastic from then on, and he really was the. Even like T-Rex. I mean, his albums were great as well. I never really liked T-Rex albums, but he just was fantastic. Everything he did was fantastic.
Yeah, it was quite lucky, because finding somebody that your first love, you're kind of going to be with them all your life. So thank God it wasn't Gary Clifford, because Bowie was I did appreciate it a bit as I was getting older, thinking, oh, he's quite extraordinary, because he just brought out so much material, and a lot of it, was kind of hard going, but it was there. There's always this next thing that he was putting together, whether it was kind of his. I missed I suppose the late 70s I wasn't so well, but the 80s I definitely, and then a bit of Tin Machine, then his drum and bass stuff, and then he sort of went back to reality and healing, for what he was kind of good at, really. But he did so much in between, and then he obviously did Black Star, which was quite a kind of unbelievable piece of work. When
I think Tin Machine was a bit out there, but he was always trying new things. That's the thing, and they can't always be hits, can they?
Yeah, and I think, when I remember when he was working with Brian Eno in the late 70s, it was like, let's just do something. It doesn't matter, no one's going to die. And I suppose that was that attitude. I mean, everyone goes on that knows their favourite album, but at the time, side 2 must have freaked people out. And I always remember Charles Shaar Murray with his kind of famous rant about this is the worst thing ever, David. We don't need this record. And thinking, kind of blew his career, really, Charles Shaar Murray, wasn't it? It's like,
well, I was right in the zone for that record. So that record came out in '77, didn't it? So I was 18, And the thing is that Kraftwerk had been around, so you were sort of used to it. You'd heard stuff like that, so it wasn't anything like so shocking, really, So you just sort of took it.
Yeah.
And Slide with the songs on was really great, So. And that is a real favourite of mine, that record, actually.
Well, I think it was almost the last song on side 1, Be My Wife, which has just got the most incredible rhythm drumming by Dennis on it, Dennis Davis, and it's just incredible. It's like 2.5 minutes, but it's such a ferocious kind of rock pop song. You know, it's brilliant. Actually. So when did you? I mean, did you come from a sort of a musical house?
I just so going back, I saw Steve Jones, the guitarist out of the Sex Pistols, right?
Yeah.
He's got an Instagram page, and which I mean, I follow about 3 people on. I followed him on Instagram because he was funny. But the last time I saw it, which was probably this week, he did he just on an acoustic guitar. He just did a really good version of "Always Crashing in the Same Car," just on the
Brilliant.
acoustic guitar, really good. As soon as he started, I thought, this is a great song. What's this? Hang on, hang on. Oh yeah, I remember. This is a great song, you know. And the fact that you could that you could do it on an acoustic guitar so successfully just on your own, I think that just kind of, you know, it sort of proves that. There, you know.
Yes, I do. I've got very fond memories of that playing vision. And, yeah,
But
I'll have to
I
go.
think, I don't know. Sorry to interrupt, but is this a online radio station?
Yeah, well, no, it's kind of future radio, but also I put these interviews up sort of as well, just because people enjoy listening to them. So it's a bit
Okay.
of both, really. So yes,
And
it's
do you
quite
edit it, or should I be concise?
well. Mostly they're quite unedited because you know
Okay.
normally it kind of just rolls and it gets to an end and you just go, okay, let's say goodbye and that's it.
Okay. All right.
Yes, there you go. So going back to your So when did your musical journey begin?
Um, I suppose really it would have been about 1970 or 71 when my dad bought, my dad was a cobbler, and I think one of the lads at his, who worked with him did something naughty and got put in Borstal. And my dad bought his record player off him to help him out because he needed some money, and he just bought it, and he just brought this sort of record player which was like on 4 legs, and it had a compartment for singles, and he had he had a bunch of singles in there, 60s singles really.
Yeah,
And that's really where it started. It had Let It Be In by the Beatles, which I just played and played and played, you know. And that's really where it started. That's when
yeah.
I had a record player. And you couldn't, as you're a kid, you can only buy records on birthdays and at Christmases, really. You haven't got your own money, have you?
Well, no, that the Space Oddity one with David Bowie probably cost about 79p and took months to save up all those sort of coins until you could go to the shop and go, oh, I want Space Oddity, and then you played the B side. You go, oh, Changes and Velvet Goldmine. That's amazing. B sides are so good. It went downhill very quickly after that. But yes, it was a big thing. It was a big purchase, and then it wasn't something that you just went and got the next day because you just felt like it or just downloaded it.
No,
Yeah,
no, no, that's right, yeah.
it was a big commitment. So were your parents at all musical?
No, no. My dad, the first thing he bought when he got a job in the early 50s, he bought a radiogram. He liked records, He liked Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, and he bought a radiogram. And the first thing that I bought when I got a job, I bought a hi-fi, like with the stereo, so it's the same sort of thing.
Yes,
Um,
with the receiver, turntable receiver, cassette, and then the speakers.
no, it was just a record deck and speakers.
Right, right.
Turntable, And also, it's, insane sort of the 70s. I carried it home from the shop. So I had to, so I had 2 boxes. I had a big box with 2 speakers in. And I had a big box with 2 speakers in, a box with an amp in, and a box with a stereo deck in, right? So all those boxes, and I'd carry them all home. And I didn't think about getting a taxi or a car. It wasn't an option really. I was sort of 16. I just carried them home. I had to just keep stopping and resting on walls. It must have taken me ages to get home,
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great thing, but it's still sounds great today. I got the amp broke So I've got a different amp. But yeah, it still sounds great. Same one.
Yeah. And when did the musical instrument appear? When did you sort of think, because I've never gone from being a fan and listening to actually trying to do anything beyond that.
I suppose the guitar came along when I was 15, so 1974. So yeah, just sort of strumming in your room, strumming guitar, playing records, the 5 records that you've got at that age, Um, and in the band that I was with, there's Rob, who was like my friend, and we were the same age. We were always in the same class, and we all just picked these up at things at the same time. He was, he liked the same records that I liked. He was hugely into David Bowie, and we just got guitars and just started sort of strumming along together.
Yes, and was this in the Lincolnshire area?
In Lincoln, yeah.
Yes. So when did you start hitting gigs and such like, and getting very excited about your first ever gig?
Well, I think the thing is that in the mid-70s, there wasn't, like, David Bowie released a record once a year, and a year is such like an age when you're that, when you're a teenager. It's just, a year is such a long time, and it was pretty boring, really, and it wasn't until the Sex Pistols came along and all that you could see that you could be in a band, because you could just make a racket at least and be in a band. But it wasn't. You didn't have to have keyboard players or drummers who could drum, or you to be able to be proficient. It was a very primitive musical form that sounded fantastic at that time, and the best of it still does.
Yeah,
Had a
absolutely.
I mean, and that's really when we were able to. So we were playing together, trying to do Ziggy Stardust and Get Back, just 2 guitars. But then once punk came along, bingo, it's like, you could just do it, get a bass, get a drummer, let's go, and immediately you could just write songs for a laugh, and just thrash them out, and they seem to sound great.
Yes, absolutely. And what happened first, the band or the name?
No, the band. We would kind of rehearsing. I had a drum, so I fancied being a drummer, and that was actually the first instrument I got. My dad got like a cheap set of drums, but I just realised that I just couldn't do it. And then somebody knew that I had this kit and told this fellow that was looking for a kit about me, and he came down, and he was like 14 or 15, and I just gave him to him, pretty much. I think he might have bought me a pint of beer or something. I was just glad to get him out of the room. And so we knew that all of a sudden then we met a drummer, so he became the drummer, so we could, and that was it. That was the 3 of us, and then we were away, so we would just rehearse in this drummer's dad's back room, and make up these punk songs. Initially they were just sort of for kind of funny and just having a laugh, really, and then we started doing shows, and it started going pretty well. We're only a local band. We never sort of went around anywhere, but we did lots of gigs locally, and we got a following. People would come and see us.
Yes, absolutely. And lyrically, did you start off being quite a politically observant band, or did that develop quite quickly with time?
I think it developed really too. I mean, we only did one sort of political song, really, I think, but that was the sort of DND sort of time, and it was the Cold War was still on. It's quite a long time ago. It was a different world. The world slowly changed, and now it's a different world. But yeah, I mean, the Cold War was still on then. I mean, it was, and you didn't know anything about Russia. You didn't know anything about China. I mean, everything. There's all these countries that were sort of completely closed off.
Yes, absolutely. You used to sort of be able to listen to sort of strange radio stations at night, which were sort of, I think, from memory, site propaganda that you'd wonder if you should be listening to, but they were so boring you didn't listen to for very long. But it was quite something. So in that kind of the world that you were living in, there was never any sense that you were kind of fascinated with the world of prog rock or even heavy metal. It was definitely punk, the Ramones, Sex Pistols, that were the driving force of the band.
That's what got us going, really. So I was in this group with and Rob, who was my friend, who was like the main songwriter, really, and he passed away this year. And in our dialogue, I sort of said, well, do you remember me telling you about Sex Pistols? I said, because I saw him on the television on a TV show called So It Goes the night before. And the next day we were fishing. It was so boring. This was on a Sunday. So Sunday, everything was closed apart from the cinema. And in lockdown, the first thing I thought when I was walking around and everywhere was deserted, I thought, oh, this is just like Sundays used to be, because there's just like no traffic on the road. There's nowhere to go. All the shops were closed. And we were fishing down on the riverbank, and it was in the summer. And as he and I were fishing, I said, "Did you see that band on this So It Goes last night?" I said, "No." I said, "Oh, Sex Pistols." I said, "They're hilarious, And then a month later, you hear the record, and it's the best record you've ever heard,
Yes.
So I had this conversation with him, and he said, "I don't remember that, So I googled when Sex Pistols were on So It Goes, and it was August 1976. And then I have a diary for that year, and I went to it, and there it is in the diary. Went fishing with Rob. So it wasn't a false memory; it was a real memory.
Yes, I know this is very tricky because we're talking over 40 years ago now, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Aren't we? 80s, 40 years ago. I mean, so we're talking about 44 years ago. So if it was 44 years before that, it's like, hang on, so 1932. Sure, they're talking about 1932 when we were on the riverbank.
Yes, fishing. And you heard that new record. You thought, God, the jazz scene is taking off. We need to get
Talking
back.
was just coming in.
Yes, this is right. Charlie Chapman's career is going to be over very soon. Not looking good. So then the band, obviously, what I've noticed doing the show is that we had gatekeepers back in those days, didn't we? We had various things that just were very handy. We had John Peel, we had the music papers. Every small town and big town had venues where you play alternative indie nights, or whatever they like to call them, especially in the 80s and 90s. I mean, so you obviously had that kind of opportunity, or certainly that was there at the time. 3 music papers, which was quite extraordinary, and then you had sort of Record Mirror as well.
Yeah, there was. I mean, that was a date. That was a must read. Every week it came out. I mean, there was a lot. Music. I got kids who were sort of 19 and 23, and they're equally as mad on music, but they just go online, and it's so different then. I mean, in those days, you got the music papers every week, which you would just read, and to find out what was going on, and they were very thorough and pretty well written and pretty exciting to read, because you find out what's going on in London, and you just to go to London. But by that time, I'd probably been to London 3 times, if that, maybe twice. So it's a whole different world, And and John Peel on the radio, and that was it. And then mainly what you'd do is you walk down the streets and you'd bump into people. This is one of the things that I noticed in my diary. You'd sort of bump into people and talk about music, and they'd tell you, "Have you heard this?" or "I've heard this. This is great." And then they'd maybe say, "I'd like to hear that." And then, "All right, I'll do you a tape." And then you get a tape of it, And it was word of mouth. It was pretty small sort of scene, but it was going on everywhere. And when the punk thing arrived, all of a sudden there was people just like us in every town in Britain that were bored with what was going on and wanted something new. But it just, as soon as it happened, just people came out of the ground all over the country, and then before you knew it, there's like 1,000 bands going on,
It was, it was very dynamic.
Just in the in the friends that I had in Lincoln, there's probably 5 bands.
Yeah, and yes, like you said, those kind of incredible cassettes that we used to sort of pass around, and even worse, if you ever tried to make a mixtape for somebody you vaguely fancied, that would take you days to do.
Yeah.
And and every song had to mean something or not mean something. Well, it did have to mean something, but it couldn't. Yeah, I mean, there was too much thought into those compilations. Really.
But you would see spotty youths, sort of pale skin, sort of black hair, dyed, a Mac on or something, walking down the street with like a guitar or a Wasp synthesizer or a microphone. You just see them walking down the street. You go into rehearsal having just bought it, going home. It was, a quite a usual sight. Don't see it anymore.
No, it's not a usual sight. You just get delivery from Amazon now, don't you? That's kind of it, and people just in their rooms
Yeah, they
probably being far too competent, really, and not just giving it a go.
Well, I just as I say, the world's changed so much, hasn't it? But back then, it was analog world.
Very, very. So when did you, because I'm from Norwich, okay, it's not the greatest place for music. I mean, we've got good venues and we've had lots of good bands come, but apart from, we have the Farmers Boys, Serious Drinking, the Higsons, it was pretty dismal. So musically, obviously even Lincoln, has a better music scene, doesn't it? Or had a better music scene.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the music scene really was. Well, I mean, there was a couple of colleges where you could play, and there was a club in the city where you could get a gig. But they were just teenage bands, really, and they all kind of I mean, that you'd meet like-minded people in the record shops or record shop,
Yes.
and it was just a whole bunch of us that I'd say it wasn't much of a scene, but we all put records out, and it was the time of the independent record, you see, so we all put our own records out.
So your first single, which was very exciting, this was on a label called Company Records, wasn't it? Yeah. So who are Company Records?
That was me. So I had a partner, and we so what we did, because at that time, I really was bored, and so when punk came along, I really jumped in head first because I've been desperate for something like this to come along. I sort of envied the Beatles having rock and roll and skiffle, and then envied the sort of bands in the '60s, having all that great music and all those clubs to play, and you could go out and see bands, but that all seemed to have gone. And so when punk came along, I really jumped in head first. So I had a partner, and we started buying independent like bands records. People would put their own records out. We'd buy a box of records from the band, and we'd put a classified ad in the NME listing all these records, and we'd sell them mail order. And then from that, and that got going pretty well. I mean, we got we were getting a little sort of business going. And so we decided to put our own record out. So we put, calling it's just company records, just switched it around. And we put out Thomas Lear single, Private Plane, Robert Rental. These are electronic records, Paralysis, and we put Cigarettes out. And then, the cigarettes, I think we must have sold 5,000 for those singles, which I don't know, at the time it wasn't a lot, but then it got to the point where getting number one record in the 90s, you probably only had to sell 10,000, So
yes, absolutely. So did you do that mail order, or did you go through the cartel or distribution company?
No, we did that through. That's a good question. How did we do that? We also done it through the cartel. I mean, I remember when the cartel. I think we sold them sold a mail order, and then I think people like Rough Trade would buy them, and then certain Small Wonder. So record shops. The cartel hadn't actually been created then.
Right.
Because of I was getting into this whole scene of the independent records, and I think I probably sent a box here and a box there, and I knew a few people at the shops. Probably sold them like that, and sold most from mail order. And then we probably shifted a few more when John Peel started playing it.
Yes, absolutely. Because because looking at that kind of scene, you have the punk period, and then that quickly gets kind of a bit awful. The bands that start, following on. in the scene. You could see it in the 60s. So you must have been more of a sort of almost more of a post-punk band, really, coming up the late 70s.
Well, we did our first. I mean, what do we do? Our first recordings would have been at the beginning of 1978, and we finished in 1979, probably about the end of 1979.
Right. Yes.
I mean, I don't know for sure, but that sort of thing. I'm trying to think when I came to London. Came to London in 1981, so I think that's about the time scale. A couple of years between 78 and the beginning of 1980, perhaps.
And what's your memory of your first? Was the first single and studio experience? Was it "They're Back Again, Here They Come"?
Yeah. Well, we did a demo. We demoed all our songs basically. We went into a studio, 4-track studio, just outside Lincoln, and we recorded like 7 songs, and we put them on a cassette, and we sold those. You know, we just advertised those mail order and sold those. And I don't know if they're Back Again was on that, or whether we went in and did a recorded that and then put that out as a single. I think it was on that. And yeah, and then we put the single out. The single, you know, John Peel really liked it. He put it in his festive 50 or festive 100, whatever he did at Christmas. He gave us a session, and he gave us a gig. He did a gig for his road show in Northampton.
Nice.
So yeah, he liked it.
What was your memories of the John Peel session?
Oh, great! I mean, I think the producer we got was one of Mott the Hoople, I think.
Was it Dale Griffin?
I can't remember.
Because he was the drummer, wasn't he? And he did a lot of sessions, especially in the 80s.
Yeah, it was him, yeah. And yeah, went down to Maida Vale, you know, and Delaware Road, Maida Vale Studios. And yeah, we did 4 tracks in, you know, it's fantastic because just like proper professional equipment. You want the piano, there's a grand piano there, you know. And we did need a piano. We did need a piano as it goes.
Yes.
But just to make noise on. So yeah, it was great. And you know, it's just very exciting getting a van, driving down to London, getting all your gear in the studio, setting it all up. All right, boys, you know, let's go. You know, I mean, it was great, it's thrilling.
So at that stage, were you looking at music as a sort of, you know, and the band as something that might, you know, be a serious kind of entity?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it was just what you did between school and getting a job.
Right.
I mean, for me, I was always, you know, as soon as this opened up, I wanted to get down to London. I wanted to be in the music business. And, you know, I was so desperate for something to happen. I mean, before the punk thing happened, you got no idea how sort of desperate I was for something to happen, you know, but you never knew if it was going to happen, you know. So as soon as it happened, I really just went for it. And I was able to get down to London and get in the music game, you know, and that was really great for me. That's what I was that's what I wanted to do. I had no real thought of being in a band, you know, I don't think so. Because I was putting records out. I started managing a group called Swinging Laurels. You know, I was just the band was just one thing really.
Yes.
You know.
And so with the 3 of you, did you kind of have that moment where you kind of sat down to say, to quote Jim Morrison, the end? Was it that moment? Did you have a moment? Or, you know, because a lot of people say, you know, they were either on a tour or they were at a gig or they were in the studio, they kind of realised.
I think I was just so busy, and I just said, I'm moving to London now. You know.
Well, they didn't. Was it the same with all of you, all 3 of you? Were you all sort of in the same kind of, yeah, that's fine.
Adam, the drummer, he went off to college around that same time. You know, he went off to Bristol to university or something. You know, so because he was 15 was he 15 in, yeah, so he'd be 17, 18 or something, and just left school and went to Bristol. So that's the sort of thing, you see. It wasn't really, so that is, we weren't really thinking, let's get a record deal. I don't think we never would have thought that or tried to do anything. We just did it.
Yes, that's
Made records,
amazing. So
and,
were you? So just fast forward before we go back again. So when Optic, so how did it go? Did Optic Nerve all the way from Preston get in touch and say, look, we love your stuff? Did you go, oh, really?
yeah. Well, no, he went quiet for a long time, and then in the 90s, somebody got in touch and wanted to put out, the cigarettes recordings, which we did. And I was just kind of, at the time, I mean, I wasn't particularly interested. I just gave them the recordings and took 500 quid or something and split it between us, and that was that. I didn't really think about it. But then after time, other companies got in touch to put their back again on compilations. It's been on a few compilations, that particular track. And then when Optic Nerve got in touch, I was sort of kind of flattered. But the first thing I said to him, I said, "Yeah, sure, but all I want is a nice sleeve, because the original recordings when they were put out, it wasn't a very good sleeve, and the artwork wasn't very good. And it was just a bit shabby, really.
Yes.
So I'd just like it to be a nice sleeve. And then I don't know if it is a nice sleeve. I mean, I like it because I did it, and I got all the photographs that I could find from that time of us, and none of them was really strong enough to be a cover on its own. So I used all the photographs that were at all any good, and I put them on all over the cover, and then so it's like a bit like an album for us. So like for us three, when you've got it, you got the music and you got the pictures, you got the whole package there in your hand.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the whole story. So and then inside, when you open it up, I did it's like a painting and a photo collage of the cassette, of the demo cassette, the 7-track demo cassette that we did, and that's it really. And I thought, well, there you go. That's the whole story for us as a memento of that time.
Yes, which is very nice. Which is very
And
nice
then
indeed.
when Ian at the Optic Nerve, he made such a great job of the printing and the presentation and the quality. And then it came when I got one in the post, I opened it up, and like there was all sorts of things fell out, badges and stickers and posters. I couldn't believe it. He did a T-shirt. I mean, I couldn't believe it. So he did a great job. Yeah, I was very pleased with that. And then he
Yes.
sold them all pretty quick. And then the reviews came out, and he kept sending me these reviews that were all really good reviews. I just thought he was making it up, really. I couldn't believe it. So it all went very well, and good for him. I think he sold them all and did a great job.
Yes, and I noticed, you're on Spotify now, and you get a lot of monthly listens, and it must be kind of strange if you're talking about something you did 42 years ago that
Well,
probably didn't do.
I've got Apple Music. I've not got Spotify, but so if you go on Spotify, can you see how often it's been played?
Yeah,
Wow.
you can see it's there, and obviously, if you, and the good, I mean, obviously a lot of people don't get any, well, the money isn't great, but you can kind of, you get discovered because it kind of says, well, if you like this band, you might like this, and it's just a click away, isn't it, to quote Mick
Yeah.
Jagger.
And that's
Well,
very good. That's my daughter's got such an incredible musical knowledge, going back through jazz, blues, the 60s, the 90s, sort of reggae, dance music, sort of soul. I mean, and it's all from that. Just clicking. If you like this, you like that.
yes, so there you go. So with all those quite obscure bands, obviously, there's going to keep you people all over the world, like me, probably young kids as well as us oldies. And the thing, what I've noticed is that a lot of stuff during that time, the 70s and especially the 80s, to be honest, I missed it because you couldn't you couldn't afford it, and you couldn't always get it if you wanted to. You might hear it on John Peel, scribble down the name of the band and think, brilliant, I've got a bit of paper with the name, but where do I go and get it? That's the end. Whereas actually now you can go back and go, oh, these are the bands I missed the first time round,
Yeah.
40 years ago, but now I can listen to them and, and obviously buy the vinyl, the heavy vinyl, beautiful sleeve of the cigarettes.
Or even Shazam. When you hear sort of music on the television. You get Shazam out, find out what it is. You know.
I never use Shazam.
No, no,
Yeah.
that's great. It's a really good, it's useful sort of tool for discovering new music. You know.
So,
You know
so
what I mean?
I can imagine it's very handy. So, what happened to you then with your entrepreneurial and creative moves as the band finished in the early 80s? And then, you know, us indie kids were doing our thing. What did you do for the rest of the life?
So in the 80s, I was managing kind of groups and getting record deals, and I was sort of, and then I lived in America towards the end of the 80s, managing a couple of record producers and a band, the Screaming Blue Messiahs. Do
Oh
you
my
hear?
God, yes, I've done interviews with two of the members, the drummer and the bass player.
Oh yeah, Kenny and Chris.
Well, not the singer.
Oh yeah, Kenny and Chris. Kenny's a drummer and Chris is the bass player.
Right, but not who's the lead singer?
Bill Carter.
Bill Carter, the famous Bill Carter.
And I did that, and then they split up, and I was in America, and then I just came home really, and I'm a tour manager now, so I tour manage Jules Holland and the Rhythm and Blues Orchestra, and I've been doing that since 1993.
Right, Limey. Yes, I've done an interview with the guitarist who I think he lives in the Norfolk area.
Yeah, Mark Flanagan. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
lives
the
in.
one. Yes, he always told me an amazing story when he sort of hung out with George Harrison by a swimming pool, thinking this is a bit unreal.
Said what? Sorry.
Oh, I think he was on the road with Jules Holland. You know, they were just travelling. He said, "Oh, I've just got to go and see George Harrison," and you know, suddenly was there by George Harrison's, you know, kind of rather huge Harrison swimming pool, sort of hanging out there while Jules and George did some chatting, and him just sitting there thinking, "God, this is a bit strange. I'm near one of the Beatles. I feel a bit unusual."
Well, that I had a similar experience because my very first gig, my very first day on the job, I had to go pick Jules up from George Harrison's house because they were doing the anthology TV show and he was interviewing.
Right.
And then he was doing the interviews, and then he had a show in Portsmouth. So I had to drive from London to George's to get Jules and then go on and do the gig. And that was the first gig. That was my first day at work, you know. So I thought, blimey.
Yes, interesting. And how did you cope with people like, you know, the Screaming Blue Messiahs, who had that big moment when David Bowie suddenly said, "Yes, one of my favourite bands has been the Screaming Blue Messiahs," and everyone was like, "Right, let's go and find that album."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, their records were great and they were a great live band, but Bill in particular, you know, is really keen on America and Americana, and they got going in America through college radio. And so there was a lot of time spent in America, sort of touring around there, really. And it's one of those things, it's a bit like with Slade. You go away for too long, and when you come back, everything's moved on, you know.
Yes.
When we came
And
back to do a tour, the Stone Roses were the big thing. And we were in the Kentish town heading north, picking Bill up, and the sort of bus was waiting there for Bill, and I nipped out because we'd just kind of come from America. I nipped out to the record shop to buy a tape of the Stone Roses because I'd not heard them, but there was a lot of fuss about them, you know. And I remember Chris, who you've spoken to, the bass player. We put it on in the bus, and he says it just sounds like Herman's Hermits to me. And I thought he had a good point. I could see what he meant, you know.
yes.
Although I did like him, I mean, I got to like him, but I had to get over that. So I thought it was a very funny comment.
But yes, the musical scene, because I suppose with me, I sort of became obsessed with the indie world, but realised that it did have a quite the 80s, about 5 year period, which was roughly the years of the Smiths, between 83 to 87. And then they split up, and then ecstasy became a thing, and then there was the Manchester scene with that dance scene, and then there was the Seattle grunge scene, and then that finishes, and then there was Britpop, and then that finishes. So the things move on very quickly.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And that is quite tricky. So what advice would you give? Because obviously going from being in a band to record, managing bands and producers, and then being a tour manager. I mean, what sort of experience? What wisdom would you give anybody starting out in that murky and interesting world that is rock and roll?
I think you just got to do what you do to, how you want it. Make it sound how you want it, and just stick with it and keep sticking with it and keep going, and round the corner is a break. You got to get out there and do stuff. You can't sit at home really and do it, because in my day, I mean, now I don't know, but in those days, if you had to get out there and try and get gigs, you had to go to the clubs and try and get gigs, or the pubs. You had to try and get gigs. You had to go out and meet record people and try and get records. You had to get your records in shops. You had to get out on your feet and run around doing stuff, and bump. And the music industry, is at that time I'm sure it's the same now. It's pretty small, If you find somebody who's if you bump in, if you somebody in a record shop, you might see them a couple of years later, and they'll be sort of in a record company. You know what I mean? It's like you see that the same people just circulate around, and if you're really desperate and stick with it, you'll be able to get ahead, because you'll end up knowing people in the business, because when you start, nobody knows anybody, but as soon as you go around meeting people, all of a sudden you go, oh, I know that guy, hang on, he's there, and you can get going.
Build your network, which is quite interesting. And obviously, like having chatted with 2 of the 3 members of Screaming Blue Messiahs, I mean, it's quite interesting, because I remember Kenny saying that when he heard one of the live albums that got released, he said he's got no memory of the gig because he was kind of pretty hammered. I mean, how did you cope with that world that was kind of, rock and roll?
Well, I think that record was in Scandinavia, wasn't it? That gig.
I think so, yeah.
I remember it. I mean, that was just before they split up, and we'd been on the road, and it was cold. It was coming up to Christmas. It was November, December, and we're in Northern Europe. It was really cold and miserable, and they weren't getting on. The singer, they'd just had enough, and it was a bad time. That's probably why he doesn't remember it. But it's got nothing to do with overindulgence at all. At that time when that record was made or recorded, he was just very grim, very gloomy.
Yes.
He was on the North Sea ferry coming back from that tour, which had been on the road for 2 months maybe, and we were on a North Sea ferry, and it looked like the sort of ship that may have sort of been at Dunkirk in the Second World War. I mean, it was literally rusting, and we were down there, and it was really rough seas, and waves were banging the hull, and it was just I mean, you felt like you're never going to make it, and we're in the bar. Sort of hanging on for dear life, and that's when they split up. And then I got back. We got back, and I drove up to, because I'd given up my apartment in America, but so I drove up to Lincoln and spent Christmas up there, and that's when they split up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, because there was one of those kind of documentaries I watched, which was I can't remember what band it was. Oh, it was the Police. That was when they got back together again, and everyone was having a great time, apart from 2 of the 3 members, Steve and Stuart. And they decided, it's like there was millions at stake at this, so it was like, for everyone's sake, can we just make it? So they had band therapy, and they kind of talked about what was going on for those 2 members. I mean, did you ever sort of have those moments yourself with bands, like let's just we really need to have a proper talk?
No, not really. I think they're grown men. They're difficult to sort of to get into that situation. I think most grown men, I mean, aren't quite as enlightened as that. And like you've got in a band, you got like the main drive, or the writer, or the singer, or there's always like a focus in a band, and when they decide they've had enough, that's usually it.
Yes.
And also, but bands only have a finite life. Apart from U2, who I don't know what their story is. It's extraordinary, but generally, bands usually have a finite life because creatively they get bored of each other or they dry up. You know.
Well,
That,
having done this show for quite a few years, interviewed all these bands, I certainly hadn't appreciated the 4 to 5 year narrative of what happened in the band, for the 80s indie bands was that they get together, especially in the early 80s where there was a lot of unemployment, so people were on job seekers allowance or unemployment. They would, they would form a band, get a single, John Peel play it, give them the John Peel session, they do the first album, things looking good, second album, things start getting a bit messy. If any a British band toured America, they'd come back and they'd all say, then we broke up because it just seemed to finish them off. And at that stage, there was two major problems. There was no money, and they really hated each other. And they were just like, and also the music industry had changed again. They were thinking, well, we were part of this scene, but that scene is now feeling quite redundant because there's a new scene and there's a new bunch of 16 to 18-year-olds who want their new, stars. They don't really want these old people in their early 20s or mid 20s anymore who've got their third album coming out. So, yeah, you're right. There's a finite moment.
yeah, there is. Yeah, the life of a band, 5 years is pretty good.
Yes, and unless you're U2, and then it seems to just go on.
Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, has any band stayed together as long as that and never changed any of its personnel? I mean, they've been together for so long now.
Well,
I
I
mean, they
suppose,
nearly 40 years, right? I mean, I bet their first record is about 1981.
yeah, probably it's either Boy or War, isn't it? But I suppose there is the Rolling Stones and bands like the Searchers and those kind of some of
Oh,
those.
they've gone through members.
But U2
They
are
stay guys.
amazing.
That's it. I mean, the Stones lost Brian Jones, but Bill Wyman went. Ronnie Wood joined. I mean,
Yeah, they had Mick Taylor for a few years.
7 years.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, yes, U2. I was thinking the Simple Minds were a little bit similar, but they're not quite as persevering as kind of
Loads
U2.
of members, and they split up for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, so and REM eventually split. So, but yeah, U2 are the one. Really.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because they just looked at the big picture and thought, look, it's just too good a gig to mess this up?
I think they must get on really well. They must sort of love each other and really appreciate each other, and they all must fulfill a role. Like I mean, I saw them play up close, um, and they were fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic. The rhythm section, the bass and drums was fantastic. Then obviously Bono's such an amazing front man and great voice and range. And then and the Edge just sort of making his soundscapes. I mean, it was just a fan. It's a trio. It's like the Who or the Jam. Bass, guitar, drums, and a vocal, right?
Yeah.
But absolutely fantastic.
Yes. And just last question, because I sort of realised that in a weird way, yes, Rob passed away this year, didn't he? Which must have been a horrible moment. But the album had also come out. So did he? Did you have a moment with the three of you who were able to sort of share that kind of collection together?
Yeah, well, I mean, the record thing, I mean, was neither here nor there when it came to Rob's illness, but we did, I met Adam, who's the drummer, and he and I went up to the hospital in January and saw him. And that was great, that was great. And I mean, it was a great thing to do for all of us, but particularly, I think for Adam and myself, and I had some correspondence with Rob, because we'd known each other since we were 4. We were in every class together at school right through, and we were sort of hung out together from 4 to sort of 21, so there's quite a lot of history there.
Yes. That must have
There's
been quite.
a lot of history there, history from when we were 6, and history from when we were 16, so yeah, it was awful sort of period, and really upsetting.
Yes. No, it's always a bit wonderful. Yes, well, a bit of a downer. That was also my 1st of March is my birthday.
Sorry?
I said the 1st of March, that's my birthday.
Oh, is it?
I think it was the day he passed away, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes, I was in Hamburg on that day when I got the call. But it's when we went, and it was his birthday on January the 6th is when we went, and we went because we'd been told he hadn't got very long, but he had nearly another couple of months, but it was all horrible. It was really awful. Yeah, really awful for his family and for him. Yeah.
Was it slightly kind of enjoyable being able to show each other kind of the collection and to see it's slightly reminisce about when you made the album or the singles?
We didn't talk about the music, just talked about sort of I don't even know if we talked about the band at all, really. To be honest, I think it was just nice to be together, obviously there was us, but we had friends around us as well. So we were just 3 people in a group of friends. We just happened to be, to have a little band between us. But it was just nice to be together.
Yes. Well, yes. Yes. Well, look, Stephen, thank you ever so much for giving me the time for this. This has been amazing. And yes, I hope it goes well with the album sales, especially for Optic Nerve. And yes, you'll be able to look at your Spotify numbers and go, yes.
I'll look into that. If you can send me a link so I can hear this.
Yes, absolutely.
I may send it to sort of Adam and to Rob's family.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't remember what we've covered, but anyway, it's nice talking to you.
Yeah, look, have a great evening and take care and best of luck for next year.
All right, thanks very much. You too.
See you. Bye-bye. And that's how you say goodbye. And that is the end of the interview. Sorry, but my vocal seems to be a bit, a little bit under power. Anyway, look, that's it. That's the end. This has been David Eastaugh, the C86 Show. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 Show. And also all these have been archived. You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening.